Dr. Terry Scott, how are you?
I'm well, Dr. David Domke. How are you?
I'm well too.
Good.
Also, this is a fucking insane time. Okay.
It is. It is. But I mean, it's looking better than it was, 2 months ago.
Very much so.
But the
So
work continues.
I asked you to come on this podcast to talk about abortion, reproductive
Mhm.
rights, and the way in which the language around that Republicans are issuing around reproduction and abortion sounds very familiar. Okay, it
Hmm.
sounds very
Hmm.
familiar. So when
And
we're
has
in
all the
Selma,
inherent ironies. But go ahead. I'll get to
what
those
was
later.
that?
I said, and has all the inherent ironies of the other ways that we hear about that language, but I'll get into that later.
Okay,
Okay.
when we go to Selma on our learning tours, we go to this cemetery, and at the cemetery there are like these markers all over the
Hmm.
place, right?
Hmm.
And we, in two of them in particular, two of these markers, we gather everybody who's with us, and
Uh-oh,
we,
you're freezing, David. I don't know if it's me. I'm going to switch connections.
okay, um,
I think
okay.
you froze for a second. Okay. Or maybe I froze. I'm on a different
What
thing.
do you have like a backup Wi-Fi like right there?
Yes, I do.
Okay, okay.
Just in case.
So good, so good. Like you have like a generator or something, okay?
Right. That's next. Not yet. That's coming up.
Okay. So when we're in Selma, we take the folks that are with us as part of our time there to a local cemetery that has a history to it. And
Yes.
while we're there at the cemetery, there are all of these markers, plaques that have
Hmm.
lots of things said on that are being said on them. And
Hmm.
we gathered the groups together and read at least one of them, often two of them together. And we noticed the language that's being used in that. And there's always this coded language that is both saying something but is also saying so much more, right?
Right, right. And also to place it further in context, it is a whites only historically cemetery with one black person buried there who was considered a quote unquote faithful slave. And adorning the lawn are all sorts of recently put down Confederate flags.
Yeah, and we read these markers which have been put up, sometime in the last couple decades.
Yeah.
We read them in the context of what they're saying, and also in the context of history, and in the
Hmm.
context of right now. So, like
Hmm.
these through lines become very, very clear to us. And it's a moment of great kind of revelation for everybody to see the ways in which the Confederacy, through the George Wallace and the massive resistance to civil rights, to Donald Trump, the through
Hmm.
lines that are present.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
I'm going to do a lecture series on this. I did one in January. I'm going to update it and do it in October, where the title of the lecture series is Lost Cause Politics, from Jefferson Davis to George Wallace to Donald Trump. And so I wanted to use this podcast to unpack one example of that today. Okay. And I need your expertise to do this because, and also I
Hey,
need
can you?
your energy because you always get really fired up about this.
I'm going to switch to my hotspot. It's an unstable connection. I'm going to switch to my hotspot. Can we pause it?
This
Sorry.
is like your third mechanism.
It's
Okay.
my third one. It's my backup. It's my third backup. We should be good going forward. We have some bad weather here, so
It could be on my side
all
too.
right.
Every once in a while, I bet we have unstable connections here. So I'm going to show. I want to put up on the screen. By the way, it's September 23rd. Everybody, it's
Yeah.
Monday. It's Sunday. It's Monday. It's Monday midday. I'm going to put up on the screen a Truth Social post from Donald Trump, which is his Twitter technology, and
Hmm.
I want to read it, and then I want you to kind of like help us to go through and to unpack some of the language, okay?
Okay, and to be clear, I don't know what it says. You have not yet told me, so
You haven't seen it. So
I'm both curious and terrified.
this was posted to Sunday, and it's a rant. It's an
Okay.
absolute rant. It is a George Wallace-esque rant, okay?
Oh gosh. All right. Here we go.
Okay. So this is what Donald Trump posted on Sunday. He said, women are poorer than they were 4 years ago, are less healthy than they were 4 years ago, are less safe on the streets than they were 4 years ago, are more depressed and unhappy than they were
What
4 years
in
ago,
the world?
and are less optimistic and confident in the future than they were 4 years ago. I will fix all of that and fast. And at long last, this national nightmare will be over. Women will be happy,
Jesus.
healthy, confident, and free. You will no longer be thinking about abortion because it is now where it always had to be, with the states and a
Jesus.
vote of the people, and with powerful exceptions like those that Ronald Reagan insisted upon for rape, incest, and life of the mother, but not allowing for Democrat demanded late term abortion in the seventh, eighth, or
Oh my
ninth
gosh.
month, or even execution of a baby after birth.
He
I,
actually is still holding on to that. Sorry, David. Go
I
ahead.
don't know. I understand. This is why I will protect women at a level never seen before. They will finally be healthy, hopeful, safe, and secure. Their lives will be happy, beautiful, and great again.
He all caps, first of all. It almost seems like a waste of our intellect and our time to have to dissect the rants of a clearly narcissistic, lunatic, evil man. And yet, here we are. This is some nonsensical thing that you would push aside when strolling through social media. And yet, this man is in a close race with Kamala Harris.
Yes, yes, we're mortified by this.
Uh,
It says everything about this country, right?
it's so shocking, and the things that he says that people continue to listen to. We are fighting on multiple fronts here because we are fighting not only that people see how this man is such a threat to democracy and a threat to the actual lives of individuals, but we're also fighting against the ideologies and the ideas of people who buy into him. We're trying to change people's minds and hearts. We are fighting on so many fronts right now. Well, we've done it before and we can do it again. I know that, but we have a lot. We have a lot in front of us.
And so part of you and me being on this podcast, on this episode of this podcast, is I want to read like we do at
Wow.
that cemetery in Selma, and we do occasionally on these learning tours. I want to read the text that's in front of us. I want to read it backwards in time and forward in time. Okay. So let's
Mm-hmm.
go one by one here, and just each of us offer, just like you do. You teach us at the cemetery in Selma. You say, what do you see here? What do you see here? All right. So let's you and me take turns saying what we see in here, and just kind of each respond to each other when we have, like, you go first, and then we'll talk about whatever you bring up. Then I'll go and we'll talk about what I bring up, and we'll see how far we go. Okay.
All right. That sounds good.
So you are seeing this text, this true social text. What's a thing that you notice and comes to your mind?
First thing that comes to my mind is I think that my blood pressure has automatically gone up by reading it. I think I can actually feel that. But just at its base level, to suggest that women generally, as though he has surveyed women across this country and how they are feeling about these particular, that for you, they're safer than they were, or less safe, poorer than they were, less healthy. There are crises that women face in this country, such as, maternal health care, the lack of access to prenatal care, things like that, that can be mitigated, and that the ones who are trying to push to try to help those things often are not coming from the political party that he aligns himself with. Women's reproductive rights have now been stripped from them in so many states. And that has everything to do with the judges that he has put in place. I was just reading over the weekend about two young mothers in Georgia who died because of the
Yeah.
lack of care.
Yeah.
So if they are unhealthy or less healthy than they were, those statistics have everything to do with a lack of having reproductive care. That's what that has to do with. He has no responsibility that he takes onto himself for that,
Mm.
and instead totes that people will stop worrying about abortion once he's in office because it somehow miraculously won't be a thing. And these are often women who wanted, I mean, whether or not somebody wants to be pregnant or not, that's firmly their business. first and foremost. But now what he has done has, and with the courts, has created this fear among doctors who, even if a woman had planned a pregnancy and the pregnancy did not come to term and they needed to have an abortion due to that, that the doctors won't give that to them. Life-saving care because of their fear of being imprisoned. And that has everything to do with Trump. But he is such a narcissist that he'll never make the connection or doesn't care to make the connection. All right, I went for a long time. You go, David.
Right. So I get from what you just said, the in unwillingness, never will do it, taking a responsibility for any of this, right?
Correct.
Like if these things happen to be true, then he is directly responsible for them.
Right.
Okay.
Rather than what he's suggesting that the Biden administration is responsible for them.
Right. Right. Okay. Here's what I want to do, and I need your help. So I'm going to change the word women in this to Black Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I want to tell you if this sounds familiar to you. Okay. Black Americans are poorer than they were 4 years ago, are less healthy than they were 4 years ago, are less safe on the streets than they were 4 years ago, are more depressed and unhappy than they were 4 years ago, and are less optimistic and confident in the future than they were 4 years ago. I will fix all of that and fast, and at long last, this national nightmare of Reconstruction will be over. Black Americans will be happy, healthy, confident, and free. You will no longer be thinking about slavery because it is now where it always had to be, with the states and a vote of the people. All right.
Mm-hmm.
To me, this exact text could be lifted out of a white supremacist argument about
Absolutely.
why Reconstruction and the ending of slavery was a bad thing for America. To me, this is an argument that we have heard over and over and over again about people who, white Americans in power, arguing, white men in power,
Mm-hmm.
who should be arguing for why their model of the world was the right one. And everybody else is really happy at the end. And he says, I'm just going to say, the slaves will finally be healthy, happy, hopeful, safe, and secure. Their lives will be happy, helpful, beautiful, and great again because I'm going to make it so. All right.
Absolutely. Because I know how to do this best. This harkens back to the notion of a states' rights argument being so historically tied to race, whether it was during Reconstruction, whether it was during the period of slavery or Jim Crow. It was a states' rights notion that rebuked the idea that the federal government could impose their will or their power upon the state and that we know best. And then it does harken back to these kinds of notions of misogyny, this masculinity and the fragility of their whiteness, because the idea is that the intersection of their gender and their race, white men who are in these power positions who are pushing for states' rights, how dare you tell me what I am supposed to do? And they they couch that in the notion of states' rights. The irony is that then they become the thing that they hate most in telling whether it's Black people or women or whatever it is, that we can impose this on you because we know better than
Right.
you. During the American Revolution, we saw that. I forget who it was, but somebody said, how is it that the loudest yelps we hear for freedom from the English come from the people who hold people enslaved? There's this paradox of I can hold these individuals enslaved, but how dare you tell me what to do? The federal government better not tell me what to do in a state, but I'm going to tell women what they should do with their bodies.
Yeah. I mean, the argument of Southerners and those Northern accommodationists about enslavement or subsequent to enslavement, racial terror, and Jim Crow is that there were the happy and contented
Right.
African Americans. Like
Yes.
they were supposedly, this was good. They were happy. They were
Yeah.
happy 4 years ago. They were contented 4 years ago
Mm-hmm.
before slavery ended, and so it is this, yes, it is absolutely insane arrogance by the people in power to say this, like they can somehow know what makes somebody happy. But it is
Right.
also completely an obfuscation of the power that they are using to try to live out this life that they're saying. If states should have the power here, that's a power move that's being done for enslaved before,
Right.
and then in Jim Crow to African Americans, and then now to women
To
in
women.
all of these states. Because it is these states, Virginia is the only state in the former
Exactly.
Confederacy where abortion is still available to people under the same designation that Roe v. Wade had provided them. All 10 of the other former Confederacy states have wiped that out.
Absolutely. If we assume that this is not tied to the way that these states have functioned within the context of controlling race relations, then we would be wrong, based largely on that statistic that you just put forth. And the notion that they are telling when we're talking about Jim Crow or slavery and now with women, you are happiest marginalized group when I dominate you and tell you what to do. I
Right.
know that you're happiest in that context. It's where those tropes of like Sambo came from, the very happy slave. And now women, and that's the exact historical parallel. You will be happier when you allow me to dominate you and tell you what it is that you need
Exactly.
to do.
Right. Yes. It is this notion that you, the oppressed, are
Mhm.
happiest when I'm in dominance. Right.
Right. And that also then, what undergirds that argument is you're not intelligent enough to know what's best for you. You
Exactly.
need me to rule you. There is a level of really, I don't even, it's more than toxic. It's a lethal paternalism that
Yes.
undergirds this argument.
Yes. I want to pull up here the Southern Manifesto, which was this argument that the members of Congress said in 1956, saying that the Jim Crow regime should be put back into place, that the Supreme
Mhm.
Court in the Brown decision had taken us down this terrible pathway. Okay.
Okay.
Um, let's see.
While you're looking for it, I'm going to say this because one of the things that people may say is, well, then how do we account for the fact that some white women or some black men who are politicians align themselves with those arguments? And what I would say is that historically, you are always going to have some people whose minds are colonized. The oppressed's minds are colonized by the oppressor. There are always a few of those who curry favor by aligning themselves with that oppressor rather than aligning themselves in a group identity.
So you're saying some folks who represent the identity in
Right.
this
Some
in this
Black
case.
politicians, some women
Yes.
politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Though, how do we account for those? Because there are always people who would prefer to align themselves with the oppressor to curry favor rather than align themselves with the group they represent.
Exactly. Okay.
And
Okay.
their
So
minds are colonized. Just
our
putting that up.
minds are colonized.
Yeah.
So this is the language of 11 senators in the U.S. Congress in 1956, and have 70 or 80 congressmen, all from former Confederacy states. And this is the language that they get to in saying that Brown v. Board of Education is a disaster. They
Mm-hmm.
say this unwarranted exercise of power by the court, contrary to the Constitution, is creating chaos and confusion in the states principally affected. It is destroying the amicable relations between the white and Negro races that have been created through 90 years of patient effort by the good people of both races. It has planted hatred and suspicion where there has been heretofore friendship and
Oh,
understanding. Okay?
wow. Yeah. You are, again, friendship and understanding. You are happiest under this regime.
Right.
And now that the courts, the federal courts have told us that we have to dismantle this regime, this is what's causing chaos. It's not our resistance to change that's causing chaos.
Right.
It's
Right.
not our desire to keep you oppressed that's causing chaos. It's somebody telling us that we can't do that anymore that's causing chaos.
Back to Trump. Women will at last be happy, healthy, confident, and free. This is just Orwellian language, really.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to push it a little bit farther here. Um, there, there is a pretty decent line of argument that could be developed for the truth. I'm going to say that the anti-abortion positions, the most extreme, are rooted in racial animus, right?
Undoubtedly. Right.
That that we can't understand abortion politics and the opposition to abortion without understanding race in America. Can you take this and tell us what you think?
Rooted in racial politics and rooted in the replacement theory. I've been saying this for several years. It is no coincidence that
Here,
those,
let's go slow. Let's go slow here, okay?
okay,
So,
this replacement theory that people have barked about, that essentially white nationalists, white supremacists have barked about when we saw, for instance, in Charlottesville, we will not be replaced. They don't want to be replaced by people of color, by Jewish people, etc. And so inherent in these abortion laws is that notion, that same concept. And I'll break it down and say why. First of all, white supremacist groups are the ones, Proud Boys and others, who have often very loudly toted these laws and have often said in public, I love these anti-abortion laws. We should go for those.
Mm.
Why is that? Because in sheer numbers, more white women have abortions than any other race. They are the dominant, the highest number in this country per capita. They have them. Sometimes the statistics don't plan out or play out when we look at them, because often if you can have an abortion from a private space, they don't have to report that numbers. But numerous studies demonstrate that in sheer numbers, it is more white women who are having abortions than women of color. And they don't want to kind of harp on that. And so the idea is what? If we can stop abortions, we can make sure that what the census says, that white people will be in the minority in so many decades, doesn't come to fruition.
Doesn't happen. Okay. We will
Right.
not be replaced, is the
We
argument,
will
right?
not be replaced. And that is why we have this sudden uptick in the number of anti-abortion laws across these southern states.
So it's tied, you would, under this logic, it'd be tied to a diversifying America. It makes it even like it puts an imperative on the importance of getting rid of the abortion laws, because America's getting more and more diverse. More and more people are being born that are
Yes.
people of color.
Yes, it renders it urgent. Remember in the brief that was leaked that Amy Cohen, what the Supreme Court justice said,
Alito, Samuel Alito.
was it his, where it said something about domestic babies?
Oh, I don't know what this is. What are you talking about here?
So there was something that was leaked where she was talking about the concern over domestic babies, and it was this language that was couched in an idea about white babies.
Oh, I don't know I'm not familiar with what you're saying.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up, and we're gonna have to attach the article as an addendum to this when you send this
Okay,
out.
okay.
All right.
So, anyways, there was a brief. You're saying there's a
Yes,
brief
I believe so. Yeah.
in support of overturning Roe v. Wade. A brief
Correct.
that
That used the language of domestic babies, and people analyzed that and said what she means by that is this American-born, quote, white baby.
Oh, okay. Too
Yeah.
many domestic babies, she's saying.
Wanting to protect
Oh,
domestic
wanting
babies.
to protect domestic. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Sure.
But I'll look it up. I don't want to speak too much
Yeah.
on it until we have the facts.
Well, this line of through line of the states should decide, the states should decide, the states should decide, almost always is put in from what I can tell in the is almost always employed by those who don't like progressive federal laws.
Right.
Okay.
Because it's used when? It's used in issues of race, it's used in issues of reproductive rights, and it's used in issues of voting rights.
Voting.
And
Exactly.
we know very well that the voter suppression laws that have been passed are these facially neutral laws that you and I talk about, where they are non-discriminatory in the language, but discriminatory in the application and the outcome. And so the states' rights arguments, historically and today in our modern world, are used as a way for states to justify their desire to suppress the marginalized.
And then they say, you will be happier. Those of you
Yes.
that are oppressed under this, you will be happier. It's like it's like in biblical terms, it's like the devil saying these things about like I'm going to give you the great lie. Okay,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
going to convince you that you're happy under these terrible things.
Absolutely. It's like Hades or Zeus. I mean, it's the same kind of power play in saying that I know what's best for you, and I'm going to do this. Even if it hurts you, you actually will thank me for this later.
Right, that's so abusive, right? That's so abusive.
Mm-hmm.
It's the classic abuser's notion of like, I know best, I know better for you. This pain you're feeling is good for you. And
Right.
I of course probably am getting some kind of really inappropriate thrill out of enacting the
Right.
pain too.
Right. It's only imposed if it benefits the dominating class. And so this is only being done because it thereby benefits the group that is imposing these kinds of restrictions. The voter suppression laws then will benefit these right-wing, right-leaning people who are putting these in order. The rules of anti-abortion will benefit those who are concerned about replacement theory. It benefits the group imposing these ideas, and that's why they do them. And it also, and we said this before, but it bears repeating, it robs the marginalized group of any level of agency, and that's what it attempts to do, and intellect, and even mature. It infantilizes them.
Right. If they say, if the oppressed group says, this doesn't actually help me at all, this is painful, you are an abuser, then they're not actually given the ability to have that agency. They're told you can't really articulate that. You don't really know. You're wrong.
Right. Except they're given that agency when we can vote all of them out of office.
Right. So to give everybody the vote then gives agency, right?
That's correct, which is why voter suppression laws are part of this state's law kind of idea, states' rights idea.
Yeah. That connection of power, slavery to women, misogyny and oppression of women to voting rights. There is that connective tissue there seems so apparent, so obvious. The conversation that we're having here as we begin to wrap up is not a conversation you could probably have in most public schools in America today.
David, we would be asked to leave if we had this conversation in public schools in America today. Absolutely. And you say it's obvious. I think it's obvious to us, but I would bet that there'll be a number of people who are listening to this for whom it is now obvious, who may not have connected that. And that's okay. That's why we have these conversations, And so now that you know and you can put that information together, then we truly understand why our vote counts so much. If it didn't count, they wouldn't go to such lengths to end our ability to do so.
And it's this assault on truth, this attempt to stop our ability to talk about these truths, is part of what, and I want to bring this up, is present in the fact that last night in our Institute for Common Power events, right, you had a couple Zoom bombs where people came in and tried to did take over the Zoom.
Yeah. They did. And they did it in a very sophisticated way. This was not a publicly displayed Zoom link. You had to register. You had to put an email and your name and everything. And we sent out the link just to those people who had done so, and their name had to come up. And the person who came in and started they did not have screen sharing ability, but somehow had software or something to where they bypassed that security measure and they started to share pornographic images. And we had this happen before with both pornographic and racist language and images. And they did this twice to the point where we had to then continue to log off and then come back on with a new link and then come back on with a new link. It was alarming. It was jarring. But what I will say is it didn't stop us and it never will. There was no way we were just going to say, well, we can't do this event now. Something that Hank Stewart said to us recently, he is a poet laureate of Georgia, and we meet with him on our Truth and Purpose learning tours. He said, if you have never bumped into the devil, you must be walking in the same direction as him, which means then if we're doing this work and we come up against a wall of somebody who is trying to stop it in this kind of evil way, I take that as we're doing good work because somebody wants to silence us. And so we didn't stop them. Ivory Kennedy, Carmen Cruz, and Luke Mitchner are our Educators for Democracy programming team. And they were able to shift gears. And Ivory texted me and said, ain't gonna let nobody turn us around.
That's
just
right.
like the freedom song. And we're not gonna let them turn us around.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly what I thought about when I thought about us surviving, that getting on for it. And the note that you sent out to the educators either last night or this morning in our WhatsApp about the fact that we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. That this battle, this through line in American racial sexist history, to me is really, really something that I've been thinking about and am focused on, because it puts a fine stamp on why it is to me that this is so difficult. All right. It's so like, because we started this podcast with you, or early on, you saying, and yet so many Americans support this guy, right?
And here we are, right?
And here we are, and we have to work so hard when it should be so patently apparent that this is not okay. And and yet it is okay to
Mm-hmm.
so many people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is woven into the DNA more than ever. I think we understand now that they're like white people. I'm going to speak for myself and for white people for a moment to understand that there are no days off. Okay. There are
Mm-hmm.
no days off. Okay. Like this is the struggle that people of color, of course, have in this
Mm-hmm.
country. There are never days off. You never are. There's never a day off. Um, for those of us that are committed to a better democracy, there are no days off. And for white Americans, welcome to the struggle that others have been telling us about for a long time, right?
Absolutely. Even with reproductive rights, I think I've heard people say, um, I guess my own assessment of it is yes, Black women are up in arms as much as everybody else, but it was not as much of a shock to us
Yeah.
because we have seen where the Supreme Court has ruled against our group repeatedly in ways that were so detrimental. And so it wasn't as much of a shock, I think, for a lot of Black women as it may have been for non-Black women or for white women. So, but your point about that doesn't mean it's okay. It just means it was less shocking, shorter
Yeah.
distance to fall. But your point about being tired is absolute. And I think that goes to anybody, regardless of race, ethnicity, or religion, who is interested in democracy. I'll never forget that when the sit-ins happened, somebody was interviewing Adam Clayton Powell, who was a politician out of New York. And he said, and they asked him, does this mean that Negroes should be engaged in this fight? And he said, no, not at all. This means that anybody who's interested in democracy should be engaged in this fight. And that's exactly where we are now. Whether it is a group that you belong to that is being oppressed or not a group that's being oppressed, if you are an individual who is interested in human rights, who is interested in a just and inclusive democracy, that's why you fight.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's why we
Mm-hmm.
fight.
That's right. That's right. And I think we live that out in Common Power. We come from different gender identities and races and religions and ethnicities, and we fight for one another, period.
All right. Yep. You're totally right. Okay. So this is
And
why
I
we
like
need,
fighting alongside you, David.
well,
So,
thanks. This is why we needed you on the podcast this morning because when we fight, we win.
yes, that's
Yes.
right.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Terry.
You're
Thanks for your
welcome.
wisdom.
Thank you, David.
Okay. See
Thanks
ya.
for your wisdom in your work.
Thanks. Bye
Bye.
bye.